Hello again, this is Sean with Backflow Supply out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Today I want to talk about winterizing our backflow assemblies, and now is the time to be doing it. These are also attached to your sprinkler systems, and so people want to know, how do I winterize my sprinkler system and how do I winterize my backflow? In my mind, those are two different things. None of the manufacturers recommend blowing out your sprinkler lines with the backflow assembly. So what do? Now there's three main types that are on sprinkler systems. There's a double check valve, there's an RP valve or reduced pressure valve, and a pressure vacuum breaker. Let me just quickly talk about each of these. A double check valve, it only has two check valves on it, and there's no opening, no drains on it whatsoever. There's these test cocks. And in the winter time, after you turn your stop of waste off or your water supply to your sprinkler system, what I would do is I would open up all of these test cocks with the screwdriver slot that's on there. Turn my ball valve handles to a 45, and then I would take the covers off and not only inspect the parts, but just make sure all the water's out of it. Put it back together and leave it for the winter. Or if you want, you may have union nuts that are on either side of this that allows you to loosen that nut and very easily take these out for the winter. That's one type of double check. This is another one, and this is more common. This has what they call a top entry because there's only one cover to get into both check valves. Again, I would turn off the stop and waste or your water supply, open up these test cocks with the screwdriver slot, and then turn the ball valves to a 45-degree angle. And then I would take this cover off and soak the water out of it that's in there. And I tell you that because every year I have people looking for this cover plate because they didn't get the water out of it. Either they thought they blew it out, or they didn't have time to blow it out, or they didn't think they needed to, or they turned the water off and they opened these test cocks and they thought that was enough. But every year I get people coming in saying, I need a new O-ring because it's been pushed out of the side. And what's happened is that cover bowed just enough that it's no longer pressing on the O-ring in that spot, and it blew out when they turned the water on. That means that they need to replace this cover plate, or at the very least, if they're lucky, they can pound it flat around those edges. I've seen that before. Okay, so now the next most common one in the people I deal with is a reduced pressure principle. This is one, and it has a relief valve. This is one, this was a Wilkins 375, this is a Febco 825Y, and they all have relief valves. So this is a Wilkins 975 XL, this is an Apollo RP4A. They all have relief valves. Again, I would do the same thing. Turn off your source of water, open up these test cocks, turn your handles to the 45-degree angle for the ball valves, and then take the covers off to make sure all the water's out. And on this particular model, it's very important that you do that because there's no way to drain the water out. Even if you chose to blow out with the air compressor, there's no way to get the water out in between, behind the diaphragm and this brass wall. And every year people come in and water is spraying out of the side here because the water was still in there and it caused it to bow enough, just like on this O-ring for this model. And so I recommend that you take this off, make sure the water's out, and you'll resolve that problem. The other thing that happens if you don't drain the water is there's a plastic relief valve stem in there, and there's nowhere for that water to go, so that stem, which is fixed in place, just snaps in half as that water begins to freeze. Now, Wilkins on their 375 has a removable fitting. This is where the checks are, this is where the relief valve is, and it's just a plastic body, and it's very easy to remove it. There's this wedge there that all you have to do is undo those two screws. The whole vessel will slide to the inlet side, and that's out. Take that into your home and leave it for the winter. Turn your ball valve handles to the 45. I'm sorry, you wouldn't want to do that just yet. Wilkins for the 375s makes this blowout fitting. It's got two fittings. It's got a dual purpose. One is to flush out your line, and the other is to blow out your line. In between these two fittings is a wall to separate those two. But you'll put this in place, It goes back in using that same wedge. You'll tighten those 2 screws down, and then you'll get your appropriate fitting to attach your air compressor, and now you can blow out the rest of your sprinkler line. And you can either leave this in for the winter or take it back out. But then you'll want to turn those handles to a 45. On this type, which is the Wilkins 975 XL, this is called a Wye pattern because one check goes up and one comes down. And again, if you choose to blow it out with the air compressor, there's nowhere for this water on this check to go. It doesn't get blown out because there's a poppet assembly in there that just pushes down enough for the air to go through and this water stays trapped. So you definitely need to make sure you take the cover off to make sure all the water's out of it. Even if you don't use the air compressor and you've opened up these test cocks, you still need to take the cover off to make sure all the water's out of it. And then loosen the bolts around the cover of the relief valve and get your fingers behind the diaphragm and pull it away from the main body just to make sure that it's drained, and then tighten those back down. The 825Y, as you can see, is also a Wye pattern design, same type of a thing. Same thing with the relief valve. It's got a cover that you need to loosen the bolts around it, get your finger behind the diaphragm, and let the rest of the water out. Now the pressure vacuum breakers are all a little bit different, and they've changed them a little bit through the years. This is an older one, the Wilkins 720A, and it had the test cocks on the main body. Now they put the test cocks on the ball valves. So you can open those up, but you probably, in this type of scenario, won't get most of the water out. So all you have to do is undo the cover, lift the float out, soak the water out, put it back together, turn the handles to a 45, and you're done. So every year people ask me about insulating it. They'll wrap a towel around it, or they'll take some insulation from their house and wrap around it and put plastic around that and tape it up real good. You can keep in mind that you can do that, but eventually the temperature will become the same inside that insulation as it is outside. All it does is slow down the freezing process, which is great if you're using your sprinkler system a little bit late into the season because maybe you put sod down or seed for your grass, or in the spring when you're doing the same type of thing and you still get pretty cold nights. That'll protect it for that. But it's not a permanent solution. And there are sources that you can get, like this bag here is made by Decora. And it's, I believe, an R13 value. And it's sealed on 3 sides and it's open on the bottom. It's got a grommet on both sides so that you can put it over your backflow assembly and zip tie it. Again, that's just to slow down the freezing process. If for whatever reason you still have water going through it and you need to throughout the winter season, you'll want to get an enclosure that goes over the top. And for example, this manufacturer, they've got a enclosure that'll go over the top of this and a heat cable that'll go inside, and so you'll just have to run some electrical to it. Other manufacturers make enclosures that have insulation as part of the walls, and then they also will provide the heat if that's what you need. So that's another option. But as long as the water's out of it for the winter time, you shouldn't need to worry about it freezing and breaking. The other thing that I just want to clarify is I kept telling you to turn the handle to a 45 on the ball valve. And the purpose is that it's called a ball valve because it's a ball in there. It's hollow through the center of it, and so when it's open, it's obviously through the hollow part of the ball. When you have it closed, the 2 sides are pressed up against a Teflon seal that's on both ends of that ball, and when it's open, those edges are pressed up against the Teflon seal. So you don't want to leave these all the way open or all the way shut in the winter time. There's water that's stuck on the side of this ball, and you can't blow it out. There's nothing you can do to get it out, and there's not drains around it. So the best you can do is leave it at a 45-degree angle. That will leave a gap on this side and on this side of the ball, and when the water starts to freeze, it now has a place to go as it freezes and expands. But that's pretty much it for winterizing your backflow assembly. And you'll know the condition of your backflow assembly at the end of the season. You'll know what it should be like at the beginning of the season, or you'll know what parts you'll need to come and get, and you'll have a jump on the winter, or turning it on in the springtime. I hope that you found this to be helpful. We're going into a slower time of the year for backflows, and so while I've got other things I need to be doing, I do hope to have a little more time to make some more of these videos. So please click on the subscribe button and on the notification button so that you'll know when I've got a new video out. And when springtime comes, hopefully there's a video there that meets the needs that you have for this upcoming season. I want to thank you for your time, and hope that you find these videos beneficial. And have yourself a good day. Thank you.